Welcome back to Capital H. I'm Kyle Forrest, and today we're exploring how organizations are rethinking work through the lens of skills. I'm here with Sean Hinton, the general manager of SkyHive at Cornerstone and the former founder and CEO, well, not former, the founder and CEO of SkyHive prior to the acquisition by Cornerstone. And we're going to look at what it really takes to move from traditional job structures to a dynamic, skills-based approach that fuels agility and growth. Sean, thanks for joining us on Capital H. Let's just start with a little bit of an introduction of you to the audience. Can you share about your journey founding SkyHive, kind of the focus of the business, and what you're now focused on as part of Cornerstone?
Sure, absolutely. So in 2016, I was attending a conference of the Young Presidents Organization, YPO. And first day of the conference at 9 o'clock in the morning, a group of Syrian women got on stage. They had escaped Syria during the civil conflict and were living in the refugee camp in Lebanon. They spoke to us CEOs about the atrocities of the treatment of women during the Syrian crisis. And I had a complete stream of consciousness. I had previously been running a company that had nothing to do with this industry, but wanted to spend my time and energy building something that could impact the world positively. And so that was the genesis for SkyHive back in 2016.
Okay. And Sean, that type of let's go make an impact on the world could turn into any number of products or ideas. So why this particular space that you then ended up diving into?
Yeah, so I saw the problem emerging that we were coming into a fourth industrial revolution with the advancements in digital technology coupled with globalization. I have a background as a labor economist, and I could see that there was going to be massive transformation happening in global workforces around the world. I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't a humanitarian aid provider. I wasn't a financial technology person to help with microcredit, microfinance. So that stream of consciousness led me to begin to ask the question, how do we begin to look at real-time movements in the labor market across the world and couple that with how a person fits into those movements?
Yeah.
And you really couldn't do that at a job level. And so it required something deeper. That's the first part. The second part is that 6 months before I founded the company, Google DeepMind had just come up with the transformer model. That's the T in GPT. And it was the first time that we could look at what I call computational economics, where we take large-scale data from across the world and we begin to apply algorithms to looking at that data in different ways. And so technology was intersecting with the problem I was trying to solve right at the right time.
Yeah. Sean, what's fascinating and what I hope folks really key in on is you're looking at broader trends that are happening in the world, agnostic or in relation to the technology, right? Seeing the fourth industrial revolution coming, understanding the workforce shifts, because here now in 2025, as I talk to organizations or Deloitte engages with organizations who are talking about AI and technology, I always ask the question, are you also understanding what are some of the demographic or workforce shifts underway in the geographies you work in, right? Because there are massive shifts that will, in the next 5 to 10 years, continue to have structural impacts to society. So that led to your founding idea. Take us a little bit into the 2016 into 2024, how the business evolved leading into then joining Cornerstone.
So in 2016, 2017, when you would sit with a group of people and say, hey, there's going to be a fourth industrial revolution and it's going to be driven by things like AI, and we're really going to have to look at upskilling, reskilling the world. All of those terms, you would get a side eye or you would get sort of a question.
Is this the new management fad? What are you trying to sell me? Yeah.
Right. And so a great deal of time was spent in 2017 to 2020 doing a lot of research and development on applying this technology and computational economics to the problem to start to gather proof points, because reskilling, upskilling was not a common term. The world really didn't understand why it would have to do that type of transformation. And so we were doing work. One example is we did a lot of R&D work with the Canadian military. I'm originally from Canada and started the company in Canada. And their problem was, how do we increase the recruitment of women into the Canadian Armed Forces?
Yeah.
And so what we did was applied our technology to that problem. We took all of the jobs across the Canadian military. There were 207 job families.
Sure.
And we broke them all down to skills. We then applied that and looked across the entire public labor market or the civilian labor market and looked at highly correlated matches to skill sets that existed within the external labor market and compared that to the military jobs. And just as an example, a yoga instructor would be a high match to 6 jobs within the Canadian military. Obviously, some upskilling, reskilling would be required
Sure.
if they're an 80% match for a job, for example. But this led to the Canadian military increasing recruitment of women year over year by 10%. And so as we began to build these proof points, we started to work with the larger organizations in the world, the Fortune 500, Global 2000s, and really became one of the pioneering technologies in looking at skills-based workforce transformation. And then obviously, as this became a much, let's call it, more meaningful global problem and well understood, we recognized that in order to affect the true type of positive impact that I was looking for, that I would want to partner with a company that would have the scale and the breadth to be able to scale the organization globally. And so that led to the wonderful partnership with Cornerstone.
Okay, fantastic. Sean, maybe we'll even just take a moment. I think folks probably have, if they have not heard of SkyHive or they're just not familiar with it as part of Cornerstone, they've probably got a sense now of what you all do through your description. But kind of now, what's the focus for organizations? If they're coming to Cornerstone, come to SkyHive, here's the business problems and challenges that you're helping them solve.
Yeah, so Cornerstone traditionally has been and continues to be the leading technology in the world for learning. And we have 7,000 customers across the world, anything from education sector through to government, public sector, all the way up to the largest enterprises in the world. And Cornerstone obviously had brought in through the years different technologies. Recently, prior to the SkyHive acquisition, they had just acquired Tailspin,
Sure.
and prior to that, Edcast.
Yep.
And so what was transforming was a technology that had started out as an LMS, that started to move into an LXP, and then more broadly into HR technologies. With the addition of SkyHive, what happens is it's now a move into data, artificial intelligence, real-time analytics, and very much focused in the heart of HR technology. And so I run a division of the company called Transform. And Transform is basically, think of it as the GPS for organizations.
Yeah.
It's where are we today with respect to the skill sets of our workforce? Where is the world going externally with all of that real-time labor market data that we collect? And then how do we mobilize our traditional learning technologies and the actual applications that employees are using to move from point A to point B? And so what this translates to is a very, very strong understanding of job and talent architecture, putting skills frameworks in across enterprise systems, ultimately launching that into LMS, LXP, performance systems, talent marketplaces, and then rolling that up into workforce intelligence and strategic workforce planning.
Sure.
And so that's really what we spend our time doing. And that's where customers across that spectrum, if they have questions around where are we today, where do we need to go, and then how do we get there, that's what we spend our time doing. The last part is that we obviously now have the world of agentic AI. And we've implemented what we call the dual skilling paradigm, which is you're bringing in a set of agentic AI and you have a workforce. These workforces must collaborate in order to reach the strategic objectives of the organization. And so when we talk about things like job and talent architecture, strategic workforce planning, workforce intelligence, we can think of agentic AI and the upskilling and reskilling workforces as synonymous in how we're looking at it.
Okay, fantastic. So, Sean, one of the things that you highlighted, I certainly am seeing and hearing from CHROs, business leaders around, I have had these teams in the past, a talent acquisition team, a workforce planning team, a data team, a people analytics team, and they perhaps have been sitting in silos, right? Now the power of the moment and some of the things that technology is enabling to happen faster, easier, better than before is to bring those together, to integrate data sets, to really drive some new and different insights tied to upskilling the workforce, right? And if I understand, here's where tasks are being impacted by AI, the skills of the people associated with those tasks, where can I go make investments, both tied to my agentic AI or other capabilities to the humans, right? And how they evolve. But many organizations struggle with starting because their data is messy or it's in silos, right? And then there's the addition of all the external labor market data that is now available that didn't used to be available. Where are you seeing organizations start just on the journey to getting an understanding of cleaner data or bringing the data together to deliver on some of these outcomes that you noted you're helping organizations strive for?
Yeah, definitely. I've seen, obviously since 2016 to now, and supporting the largest enterprises in the world with these transformations, a great deal of maturation around their understanding of data. And what we're seeing now are obviously unified data lakes, a lot of internal sort of knowledge and understanding of treating data as an asset, just like we would have cash or we would with our computers and equipment. People are now beginning to understand data as an asset. And as a result of that, for technology developers and vendors, the way in which we approach customers needs to evolve with that and is evolving with that. And so there's far more of demand on sort of interoperability, extensibility, and becoming part of a whole as opposed to the whole in and of itself. And the good part with SkyHive is that I anticipated that as we were sort of advancing through cloud computing and we were moving into more, let's call it on-demand applications. Yep. And so Transform within Cornerstone is structured as a system of intelligence in so much as it can go into Cornerstone applications, it can go into existing ERP and other HR technologies, because we understand that the future is very much going to be very unique and bespoke within an enterprise as to how they're looking at managing and handling their data. That's one part of it. The other part of it is, and you mentioned this, the data is not exactly clean. There's kind of three buckets. It's, I have no data whatsoever. I have a lot of messy data that I need organized. Or in the very rare case, we have really strong data. And within large organizations, there's usually a collection of those across the spectrum. And so the power of bringing in real-time labor market information and where we sit today with respect to 7,000 customers over 25 years of data is that we can bring a lot of inference to where there are gaps in data that is obviously anonymous data sets that help fill in the blanks on certain gaps in data.
Now, Sean, parallel with the journey you all have been on, and you noted in early days, upskilling or reskilling were new terms, or people like, what is this? The skills transformation at large has gone through its own, this is going to be incredible. Oh my gosh, is this a fad? To people realizing this is just really hard work and it takes time and focus and effort. And then in the last year, there's been the introduction of new terms like task intelligence and work intelligence. So how have you seen some of the shifts continue to evolve out, maybe to the point of the system of intelligence? It's additional data points that help organizations tackle how is the work changing, who's it being done by, or what is it being done by, and what does that mean? But how has the evolution of things like task intelligence and more of those data insights started to evolve some of the conversations you all are having with customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think people like to put sexy terms on things, but at the end of the day, history repeats itself. And we had the exact same sort of situation with the third industrial revolution, where there was this advancement in technology, and then people left having to define, okay, what is the now state and the future state based on what's changed? And going back, probably 7 decades now, it's pretty classical in economics and human resources to have what's called a work breakdown structure. And the work breakdown structure is, let's talk about a job family, and then let's put the job in there. And then in order for us to understand the job, we need to sort of break down the tasks. In order to break down the tasks, we need to know the skills that people are applying to achieve those tasks. And then we can define that and then evaluate that. And that sort of serves as a structure. And so I think what we have right now is computing has caught up with our ability to automate and bring together large scale work breakdown structures. When I was a labor economist, I was working on national level work breakdown structures. This was in the early 2000s around the proliferation of the internet. And at that time, you'd have to get on a plane or get into a car, drive to an educational institution, sit there and literally survey people and say, okay, what is being taught? Then you needed to go down to the local employers that were hiring those graduates. You needed to understand manually what those jobs entailed. And then that would roll up usually over about 24 to 36 months into definitions of jobs. What we're seeing today is simply technology can do that work for us. And so whether it's tasks or whether it's skills or whether it's the definitions of jobs, this all exists within the framework of a work breakdown structure, which hasn't changed in 70 years. It's just now that we have more visibility into how to do that faster.
Yeah. I love the fact that you brought that out and also acknowledging this is a topic that has been explored and researched for a long time, right? I was having a conversation the other day with someone who's like, if you just step back, people, process, and technology, we've been using those terms forever, and any technological advancement, trying to figure out what are the things we have to solve relative to those three. No different than now. Can we do it faster, different, more data and insights, et cetera? Absolutely, right? And I think, hopefully, folks, as you listen, like we probably need more people with labor economist backgrounds to come help understand this is something that has been going on for a long time. And that might even help people dispel some anxiety or some uncertainty about the moment and understand here's the evolution we've always been on, right? I think sometimes there is just, when you look at any moment in time, there is human nature to say, how are we going to get through this? And there are many lessons to be learned from history, right? We have gotten through it. We have understood work is changing, to your point. Here's the now, here's the next. What do we need to do and understand for where we go from there? So, Sean, I have to imagine there are people who are asking you because of the company that you founded, the where you sit with all the customers that you have access to within Cornerstone, just your background. Like, what are some of the things you're looking forward to in the next few years and saying, here's where I see certain trends evolving that are real that maybe companies should pay attention to versus, hey, this might be a fad or TBD as to whether that's something that's actually going to be impactful for organizations to focus on. What are maybe two or the three of the things you're focusing on from a look forward perspective?
So are you asking me sort of on a thought leadership perspective in terms of AI and the impacts that that's going to have, or are you asking me to collect sort of the data points of what I'm working with on customers across the world?
Maybe both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a situation I'm very big on, and maybe it's the labor economist in me, that history repeats itself. And what we're seeing right now is very consistent to, let's call it 1997. Between 1995 and the internet coming out and the dot-com bubble, we're sitting in about 1997 where we have a technology that's been around for a long, long time in artificial intelligence. We have a technology that was used mainly by institutions and governments for a long time and then hit a tipping point where now it can begin to accelerate and take off. Exactly consistently, we have large enterprises that are investing tons into this. And it makes total sense because we have shareholders that need to see continued growth and innovation. And now we have the consumer application with the launch of GPT and Perplexity and others that are now getting into the hands of the consumer. And so let's draw the line to where history repeats itself. We're going to be lit down by a lot of the investments that we're doing today, but there's going to be a lot of sustainability in some of those investments that we're doing today. And there'll be a second wave. And the second wave will birth what will likely
innovation, new companies, new roles and jobs. And
correct.
Yeah.
What we can also expect, if we look at history repeating itself, is that we're going to have a hardware paradigm change, where today we're using AI with a lot of typing, a lot of text, a lot of our hands. And what is the next realm of that going to be? And so you're seeing investments from the large model companies into multimodal and those types of things. And so how does that impact a learner? How does that impact a company? I believe fundamentally, and this is the thought leader side of me, that people are underestimating this technology and this leap and the impact that it's going to have on business models, how we're thinking, how we're learning, how we're manufacturing. We're going to see a lot in robotics over the next couple of years as bits and atoms, as I like to say, come together. And so The question should not be about going out and getting the next greatest technology.
Sure.
The question should be about seeing ahead of the curve and understanding that sustainability needs to be in place. A lot of what the hyperbole is telling us is going to radically change overnight won't. But some of the things that we need to be considering, such as the adaptation of business models and how we're going to market, will need to change. What is the impact on things like computational interface models on the internet? And how we promote our companies and how we promote our technologies. These are all things that I feel warrant a greater, deeper dive, as opposed to trying to get people using the technology itself. That's going to naturally come. And we should be asking the questions, what is real and what is not real with respect to the changes that are coming.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that perspective because especially as you look forward into some of the workforce shifts, right? Geographies that are going to have older populations in the next several years. And I think every one of the baby boomer demographic in the next 3-4 years hits 65 plus retirement age. Successive generations have tended to retire earlier. The US, at least, just saw its largest graduating class from high school in May of 2025. So fewer people will be graduating high school and thus going to college. And so as some of these look forward technological shifts and paradigm changes also need to intersect with what does that mean for the workforce and how we tap into intelligence differently, how we might have different types of working models to bring people together to do new and different things for society at large. So, Sean, in the midst of all of that, right, some companies, public, private, whether domestic or global, are often just faced with like, I'm trying to meet my customer needs now. I'm trying to grow my business or take care of a specific business metric. Maybe what's one or two pieces of advice you would give to business or HR leaders to say, here's where you could start on a journey towards leveraging skills intelligence or workforce intelligence or a system of intelligence to drive better business decisions that'll be beneficial for your customers and for your workforce?
So one of the things that I see a lot and I've seen over the years is trying to deal with the enormity of the issue through a technology. A technology is not going to solve the enormity of the issue. And what is the enormity of the issue? I have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees. I have drastic and dramatic shifts happening in what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be doing it, who's going to be doing it, etc. Again, history repeats itself. This is not the first time we have dealt with this as humanity. So the first part is understanding, well, what am I doing today? What's actually happening? And so the debate often wages around the definition of jobs and skills and tasks. It's the wrong way to look at it. What we should be looking at is we have systems right now that are bringing in this information in real time. How do we bring those systems together and bring a harmonized definition to what's happening in those systems? And what I mean by harmonized definition is, can we all agree on what a job is? And can we all agree on what the skills are to do the job? It really doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. What matters is, can we agree on that definition? And so when we get into the technical terms on this is the discussion around taxonomy and ontology. Taxonomy and ontology, I like to say, is like debating religion. There is no right answer. What matters is how you use it and what it actually means to you in your organization. There's this assumption that undertaking a skills journey, either lots of people have done it or it hasn't worked and they've thrown it out. Neither of those two things are true. When I started SkyHive, I knew this was going to be a 30-year journey. And we're in year 9. So we're closer to the beginning than we are to the end. And the world is closer to the beginning of this transformation than it is to the end. The third industrial revolution, it's argued how long it was, but let's put an average on it. The bell curve is 62 years. So it was 62 years of this transformation and multiple generations of people figuring this out. And so what I would encourage all the leaders to do is to just understand, how do we just get the basic plumbing, the basic electricity line in place, and not succumb to the, let's call it, promises that are being made that you can switch on a technology and overnight it's going to materialize in this revolutionary workforce transformation. That's one element. The next element is understanding that companies don't grow without people. So Yes, there's automation, there's agentic, there's LLMs and all of that, but companies only grow through people. And the majority of the customers I'm dealing with right now that are faced with the technology challenge coming from their boards or C-suites on go and find efficiency, barrier they're running into is the people barrier. And so until we can bring human and machine together to improve the productivity and engagement of those human beings, we're not going to see a market step difference with respect to the
Yep.
application of these advanced technologies.
Yeah. And I feel like the thread in both of the things you just shared is people need to understand the long haul, the long game of the journey that we're on, right? In the context of who knows how long now the fourth industrial revolution will really be before everything has played out. And you need patience with the people and the tools that you're deploying, right? You can't just say AI and automation capabilities are moving rapidly. Let me launch a new tool. I think people now in the last couple of years, everything is moving as fast as the people in your organization will let it move. And so, what are the actions a company can take to help the workers understand here's how we would like you to use these tools? Here's why we would like you to use these tools. As the work changes as a result of you using the tools, here's how we will invest in new and different skills and tasks and a career for you, right? Because what do those people want to understand? How am I going to have a job, an income to support my family, my friends, have an impact in my community, right? Really bringing it down to like that individual level to then give them an inspiring vision of the future, or at least something that they're like, I understand where this is headed. Therefore, I'm excited to be on the journey, or I'm willing to go on the journey, right?
I'll throw in a couple of points on this. So, and this is just food for thought for the listeners. I was at a conference in Palo Alto last week, and there was a story being told. And this story is pretty mind blowing when you think about it. Somebody was trying to get into a technology job. They couldn't get there, had an excellent pedigree coming out of university. What they did, and this is representative of what's happening now, is they just decided to start their own company and go and get venture funding and start their own company. And that's what their job was. They said, instead of me sitting here putting in these applications on these systems, I'm just going to go and start my own company. And so when you begin to think about, okay, well, what does that mean at the macro? That's, one to think about as a company, as an employer. And so what does that mean in terms of economic systems, the responsibilities of companies, not just as companies, but as employers, as large-scale community developers? What is the relationship between post-secondary education and the employer in ensuring that the people, the young people that are coming up right now are going to be, let's call it productive members of society and community? And these are all very big questions that I feel very strongly as somebody who's in technology that we're responsible for at least contributing to, if not answering.
Yeah. Well, because ultimately people need jobs, incomes to consume goods and services from other companies. The consumptions of goods and services of those companies from a business to consumer drives business to business and spins the economic flywheel, right? And if you don't have people contributing in a valuable fashion to companies to have roles to then contribute it to their local communities, right? Who knows what the impact from a societal perspective will be on that. Sean, there's been a lot of exciting announcements from Cornerstone at HR Tech. Can you share a little bit about where Cornerstone's headed from an ethical AI perspective or things customers should be aware of?
One thing that I would want to talk about is sort of the efforts that Cornerstone's making in artificial intelligence. Obviously, it's not just with the integration of SkyHive into the company, but Cornerstone had been pretty active for the last 10 years in building sort of ethical AI and bringing in companies that were focused on artificial intelligence. And so a lot of what was announced here at HR Tech is focused on a lot of very pragmatic, practical, ethical agentic systems that Cornerstone has brought in across its existing learning technologies. And because I know a lot of listeners out there, well, of the 7,000 customers that Cornerstone has, I would highly encourage them to reach out to Cornerstone and not only discuss sort of what is happening today with respect to those announcements, but what's in the roadmap for future rollout.
And I think that is such a tremendous call to action for listeners to ask not only Cornerstone, but any of your technology vendors, how are they thinking about the data that they're using to train AI and automation? Are they thinking about ethical use cases and frameworks in mind as they do this? What are the implications of using the data? Who has access to it? All sorts of things. So I appreciate, Sean, you sharing that. And definitely, folks, there have been a number of exciting announcements from Cornerstone that you should dig into and learn more about, especially if your organization is preparing for a journey on the workforce intelligence, skills intelligence, systems of intelligence, or if you're a current Cornerstone customer and wanting to learn how you take advantage of the latest and greatest that Cornerstone is able to offer to your organization. Sean, thank you so much for joining to spend time with us on Capital H. This was a tremendous set of insights, and folks, I hope you actually do, in addition to some of the things Sean called out for the current moment that you should pay attention to, spend a little time digging into history, right? There are lessons to be learned for other moments in time society has advanced through that you can take some of those nuggets back to your organization to help people understand we've gone through this before as a society. Here's where we are in a current moment. Let's start to paint a picture for ourselves, for our company, for our workforces of where we might head and rally people around that common vision. So, folks, be sure to follow along for more on Capital H as we continue to dig into exciting topics like this. Until next time, Sean, thanks again.
Thank you, Kyle.
This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, please go to deloitte.com/about.